All right, let's get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Patrick Nicoletich, and I'm a Principal PM Manager on the App Center team. My specific focus are centered around the new backend services that we're developing, as well as some of the other services that exist in App Center today. One of the key areas that constantly gets brought up when talking with customers and developers like yourself is Azure mobile apps. Inside of the Azure portal, as well as through Azure landing pages here at Microsoft, Azure mobile apps is basically highlighted as kind of the premier way to get started with a mobile app. App Center conflicts with this design essentially. The services and offerings that we have available inside of App Center complement Azure mobile apps, but really leaves a gap where there's one that needs to be filled. When you look at the offering that Azure mobile apps contains, it's really about backend services. You have authentication, push notifications, the ability to store items in the cloud, fetch them out, do data synchronization, so on and so forth. The thing that's missing from this picture is really the rest of the story. When you come to Microsoft and come to Azure and you tell us, I need to build mobile experiences, what's the best option to do that? The answer isn't the best. And we'll fully own up to the fact that we have a lot of different offerings, a lot of different solutions, and really nothing is cohesive. And so when you look at Azure mobile apps, really it's a minimal scope. It doesn't actually service the whole end-to-end experience. Limited scalability, one of the things that we constantly hear from customers is just the issues with growth. When you start out with it, it's phenomenal. As you scale and you get more users, get more use cases inside of your products, you quickly run into limitations that prevent you from growing beyond that point. And then there's just the setup. There's the Azure mobile apps piece, right, which is very integrated into the Azure portal. If you aren't familiar with Azure in depth and you want to just get started with a hobby project, for example, it comes with a lot of baggage. You basically have to be fully into the Azure ecosystem. You have to be invested into it from not just a monetary standpoint, but a time standpoint. And really, when you want to get going and start fleshing an idea, it's very difficult to do that when you have all these other barriers in your way to get to that point. And so, enter Visual Studio App Center. Really, we were designed to solve one problem. At Microsoft, 3+ years ago, these are just some of the solutions we have for mobile developers, all with different logins, all with different experiences, different designs, everything that you would expect. Essentially, all the cohesion was gone. And so, outside of these 6 products, which I'm sure some of you are very familiar with, there's even more. Frankly, there is a massive number of experiences built around mobile and cross-platform developers, and really, it's not the best. This does not live up to the standard of the new Microsoft, nor the direction of where the company is headed. What we've been doing over the last 3 years or so is actually rewriting most of these services, and then some. And the way that we've been doing that is by bringing them all together underneath one product or service that used to be called Mobile Center, and we switched it to App Center when we GA'd the service about 1.5 years ago. When you look at the work that we've done, which is pretty extensive, we have more platforms than ever, more features than ever, we have a better design than ever. We've worked on an extensive suite of services that cover the rest of the development story, things that you will look for building your app, testing it, deploying it, getting operational information, diagnostics, analytics, put in some basic backend services like push. And really, this is the combination of 3 years of work. It's not easy taking on a lot of services at once while continuing to support existing ones. As you look at these features, think about all the services you saw on the previous screen. We actually had to support all of those while our team was growing and while we were trying to progress. The key is, this isn't even everything. These are high-level, big items that we took care of, and there's just a lot more work that goes into actually running a cloud service itself. The output of that effort was essentially our services focused on DevOps. We have Push, which was in preview. The rest of them are really focused on the DevOps portion of the lifecycle. One of the new things that we built was actually the Mac hosted pool. If you use Azure Pipelines today and you see the hosted Mac pool option, that's actually something that the App Center team manages. That's something that we built because it's required to support mobile developers trying to build on Mac OS, for example. The rest of our services are a combination of those other 6 services you saw on the previous slide, as well as new services that we're actually focused on a broader view of the world. For example, our analytics service only existed in a very, very immature form inside of other products in different formats. And really, we've tried to bring that together and connect it to other experiences in Azure that give you the same power that we use to run the App Center service itself. Our team has actually grown fairly big. I've been with the App Center team for 2.5 years. It's grown very rapidly in that time. We are all over the world. Only about less than half of us are in Redmond working on App Center. We're a remote-friendly, highly distributed team. And so chances are, no matter where you are and what time zone you're in, you'll actually find people working on App Center. If you contact our support and it actually gets moved to an engineer, you're probably talking to an engineer somewhere in the world that's working on App Center currently and is very intimate with the code base and what we're actually trying to accomplish. One of the best and most exciting things about having a team like this is just the overall diversity you bring to the group and just the different perspectives from platforms that we try to support to use cases and features that customers are looking for. Looking more into kind of what we're doing today, things have been changing. And the easiest way to see that show up is currently how our research and development is allocated. We usually don't share a lot. Especially on the App Center team, we've been working through a backlog for many years now, and we've just started to make a big shift towards transparency. What that means is sharing with you how we're spending our time, sharing with you our immediate plans, making commitments that we have to follow through on, and overall just showing you that there's a great future ahead. And so when you look at kind of where our resources are allocated today, what you'll notice is that a huge chunk is still working on the Hockey app shutdown. We made the announcement in 6 months that we're going to actually get rid of it. And so our team is busy at work making a migration experience for any of you that are actually still using Hockey app today and looking to make the switch to App Center. What that also means is that a huge amount of our bandwidth from an engineering standpoint is freeing up in 6 months. And so what I'm mainly going to talk about today is what are all the things we're going to do with all that extra time. Some of what you see, which is the MBAS work itself, which is the mobile backend as a service, eats up about 14% of our current engineering time. That is also folded into things like running other pieces of our Azure services, like notification hubs, which crosses into our mobile backend as a service offerings and plans, but is also its own Azure standalone service and comes with everything that's required to run a global service that's available in all the regions around the world. And then there's that big general bucket, which is a combination of things we need to do to keep a cloud service running, keep it operational, keep up-to-date security-wise, compliance-wise, actually handle feature requests that we see developers really wanting out of App Center. We basically carve out time, say that we understand this isn't on our current plans or roadmap, but it's important to you, so we're going to actually take care of it. And so a big allocation on our side is really around that. We want to be able to respond, adapt, and really implement the features that you care about now, while still focusing on the longer-term things that you're hoping to get out of us in the future. So at Build this year, in early May, we actually added 2 new services to the App Center portfolio. One is Auth, one is Data. The thing that you'll notice about those 2 services is that they are very much back-end focused. We started in February looking at what it might mean to replace Azure mobile apps. And we actually quickly went to work and released 2 new services in preview. Very atypical for Microsoft is working on things for 3 months and then sending them out the door, especially new services. And so this actually represents a big kind of shift in the way we work in general, especially with our developer community. The reason that we ship things early is basically for feedback. We put enough functionality into these services, which I'll cover in a little bit, to be useful and get the feedback from you to help guide us in the right direction in terms of who we should be working with, what scenarios are the most important, and really what will bring the most value to those areas of the App Center service suite. Focusing again on Azure mobile apps and Zumo. Replacing Azure mobile apps is actually not a trivial thing. It was designed 5 years ago. using technologies that at the time seemed like the best technologies to use. In Azure especially, if you've been paying attention to the services that have been created during that time, it's a very different world. We actually, as a cloud service, like to reflect on the services that we use, because the reality is if it's good enough to run a global cloud service that we're building, and it's good enough for our architecture, it should be good enough for you. And so really with these services, what we're trying to do is actually turn around the same solutions that we use and deliver to the rest of you, and actually enable you to use them as well. And so when you look at what we're targeting, we've already shipped Android, iOS, and Xamarin at builds. Xamarin will always get the features as fast as possible. That is our promise and our pledge. And so using Xamarin, you're always guaranteed to get the cutting edge. We recently added React Native support, just a few weeks ago, actually. And we already have Unity, a full-fledged .NET SDK version, and JavaScript for SPA and PWA support in the future. What this means is you'll be able to use all the MBAS services cross-platform. Doesn't matter where your client experience is or what you're running in or what you're developing in. We want to meet you there and want to make the solution very cohesive. So if you're developing on one platform, you can go to the other, right? And especially in the Xamarin community, using .NET and JavaScript are two very popular things. And so making sure we actually cover the entire spectrum is extremely important to us. When you look at our goals, we have a few ideals that we like to follow. The first one is actually our favorite, though we never really mention it, which is, we're really an extension of your development team. When you look at the products that we're building, the idea is we enable you to skip a bunch of work that you would have to do yourself. And that's honestly the most exciting thing about what we do on the App Center service side. We've taken a process that would take a significant amount of time and effort, given it clearly defined answers and paths. And by doing that, we've augmented your development team and enabled them to do more. The simple UX is a big thing on the App Center team. Since the day we started, we actually had a design team. Design was very important to us. User research is very important to us. And so we want to make sure that all of the things that we do carry through kind of that simple mindset and that simple user experience you look for, so you don't really have to invest too much cognitive load in understanding what we're trying to provide, and we make things very approachable and easy to understand. The last is a magical SDK experience. We use the word magical, delightful a lot, mainly because they sound very pleasant, but also because the reality is you want to do something and you want to feel the instant reward. When you actually put our SDKs in, when you activate different things, we want you to almost get a little hit of dopamine from it so that you feel excited, you feel wow, and you feel like, okay, I'm ready to go and I can go work on the things that I actually care about. Digging a little bit into what this actually looks like, at Build, like I was mentioning, we released previews for a new service called Auth, which is actually a combination of Azure Active Directory, B2C, and Visual Studio App Center. The thing that we are doing internally, which isn't always so visible from the external side of things, is we as the App Center team are reaching out to a lot of internal groups. We are looking to partner with them, wrap their experiences, make them easier, better. We're looking to invest in their products. We actually will make changes to their SDKs. We'll make changes to their cloud service. We'll do whatever it takes to actually make it a manageable experience. And B2C was one of those first core teams that we actually wanted to work with. One, because identity is very hard to change and work with. When you want to improve something like B2C, it takes a long time, and starting early means we have more time to make improvements there. It also affords developers that are looking to move off of Azure mobile apps to find an alternative in B2C that's meant to scale, give them all that flexibility, and when they run out of use cases for sort of the simple routes that users will go through, and they need more flexibility, more enterprise control, more providers, more ways to hook it up, they can actually get access to the B2C resource behind it and make those granular, customized kind of configurations. When you look at the actual offering inside of App Center, there's two core pieces to it. One is the ability to connect to a tenant. So currently, right now, today, you have to have a B2C tenant deployed into Azure. That's just the problem we're working on. New APIs need to be created so we can do things automatically. And so we allow you to hook this up. You can take multiple apps, one for Android, one for iOS, timed to the same backend. They can share that resource together. And you can also integrate it with other services. So diagnostics, for example, now has an understanding of what identity is about. You'll see in a second that push We've actually added identity to that as well. So now if you want to send a targeted notification, you can do it to multiple devices at the same time that a person owns instead of just one. Going back to B2C, why are we actually working with them? Really, when you approach the topic of identity at Microsoft, it's a very muddied answer, right? There's multiple options. You have B2C, you have B2B, you have AAD. You have other different avenues you can go through. You have to read tons of documentation. I don't know if you've ever attempted to read all the identity documentation, but it's tens of pages, which is simply too much. You go look at other identity providers, and they create a very cohesive package. And really, we need to be in a state where we actually have something similar. I mean, the reality is it should not take a PhD to understand what you're doing with security and identity, and we want to dumb that all down to make it just very, very simplistic. And so when you look at B2C, there's two reasons. One is we believe we can make it easier, and the second is when you need something more, it's there. And so working with other types of resources in Azure and other types of services like B2C presents not just how you get started, but how you actually grow up. And that's the most important part. When you invest time and energy and money into a solution, how much you have to reinvest as you scale matters. I mean, I know when we were building the App Center service, it mattered greatly. We invested time, we rushed certain things, and we had to rewrite them. And that's just a sunk cost. And so the more you can prevent the need to rewrite things just because you grow bigger and you get more users, the happier you'll actually be as a developer. And we totally understand that fact. So when looking at how you enable it, there are obviously some configuration settings, some changes to entitlements you need to make within your mobile app. But to really enable auth within your mobile app, it's one line of code. We have app secrets, and I don't know why I copy and pasted the same line twice. Just ignore that fact. But in App Center, you have app secrets, which allow us to dynamically pull the configuration for your identity provider into your mobile app. If you've used MSAL prior to about 2 months ago, you had to actually statically compile all of the configuration inside of the app itself. And what we did was we issued a PR to the MSAL code base that said, hey, we want to be able to dynamically change this. The reason for that is if you add things like new identity providers, let's say you only support Facebook and you want to add Google, you would actually have to recompile the app, which is not a very good experience. You lose all the flexibility from that. And so we actually made changes to MSAL that allow dynamic configurations, meaning we can pull your config from B2C. You can add providers, you can remove them, and we can do it all automatically for you. Again, just making the experience a little bit easier. When you want to sign in, it's basically one asynchronous call. This will actually bring up a web view with the ability to log into all the providers. You can use it with things like AAD today. It's not a big deal. You just have to configure B2C in a way that will allow that to happen. You can use it with Facebook, Twitter, Google, many, many other options, GitHub, of course. But they're all baked into B2C itself, which allows you to do a lot of things like customize the login page if you really want to, choose what providers are important, set up different types of flows, basic and custom, that decide how users reset passwords, how they create accounts, so on and so forth. Very powerful. But again, from a mobile perspective, it's as simple as a one-line call to actually initiate that process and get a signed-in user back. So what does it actually look like from a technical perspective? Basically, there's a few layers to it. The App Center module is what you install. We wrap the MSAL SDK. We did that for one reason, to reduce investments, right? We want to have as many teams focused on the same problem together than try to create our own solution like Azure Mobile Apps it exists with today, and do our own thing, right? Because doing your own thing will give you a solution, but it won't give you the best end-to-end experience, and that's very, very important to us. And so the MSAL SDK talks to Azure AD B2C. The advantage of using MSAL as well is that it's actually replaced ADAL. So if you've used the Active Directory Authentication Library, MSAL is basically the future. And the reason for that is we have multiple back-end options for identity providers. And again, we're trying to bring things together. And so that's just another example of that occurring within Microsoft internally, but not necessarily something that we always highlight externally. On the Azure AD B2C front, it's configured to work with other identity providers. And because of that fact, we basically can allow you to log in through them as well. So you can federate out logins. B2C manages that complexity for us. App Center will help you get a user signed in so you can do things like understand who they are, attach other information to them, send them push notifications, so on and so forth. Signing out, one-line call, of course. Everyone needs a way to sign out. Funny enough, we were so in the mode of just ship it and get feedback, there was a debate on whether or not we should wait to implement a sign-out function, which sounds a little bit weird, but really that's kind of the mentality we're in. We believe that we don't have all the answers. We know what we would use and why we want to use it. We know what we want to share. But even at the end of the day, we want to make sure to accommodate changes and feedback from everyone in this room so we can build the best solution and the right solution for you. Outside of that, as part of something that's standard to the App Center SDKs is the ability to enable and disable modules. One of the key benefits of App Center is we do have a modular SDK. So for all those services that I showed you, you can actually install the module that you care about, which again further reduces the footprint within your app and allows you to basically just package in the things that are important to you. The last method that we had added was the ability to check if it's enabled. This is one of those things, again, pretty standard to our modules, but we wanted to add it for consistency. On the App Center data side, this one kind of presents the biggest challenge for us. Data sync in Azure mobile apps is an interesting offering. It works off of SQL, which is very, very familiar to most people that develop with Microsoft's suite of offerings. And really, it's not good enough for us. We don't actually use SQL very much when we build App Center. The one reason for that is all the complexity that comes at scale. There are other tools and other services within Azure that are better for us, and we believe, frankly, they're better for you too. The key caveat to that is it comes with some complexity. One is the fact that not all developers are familiar with NoSQL and Cosmos. From a data synchronization standpoint, it actually makes things a lot easier and simpler to understand. From how you structure your data and get it in and out of Cosmos itself, it can present a nice barrier for users. And even developers coming into our team for the first time have a barrier to get over when they try to look at things like NoSQL and Cosmos. The reality is, we believe we live in a world where they're indispensable. Should you just use Cosmos or SQL? The answer is no. We don't just use one tool or the other. We use the right one for the job. What we do believe is that for things like data, Cosmos actually presents the better solution. And I'll go into a couple of reasons why in a little bit. From a client SDK standpoint, we did release some basic functionality for data too. So you can actually manage some state in and out of Cosmos. You can synchronize things offline, read things offline. And we're continuing to push forward with the solution that we have available there. So again, going back to kind of the model that we're following, and this is a theme that you're going to see very heavily throughout the rest of this talk, which is that we are very partner-focused. We are working with Cosmos. We aren't building something on top of Cosmos. And what that means is that features that you require in App Center to make data synchronization easier, better, we are actually working in conjunction with Cosmos to implement those features directly back to the Azure resource itself. Some of those things, for example, are things like partial document updates. If you've ever tried to use NoSQL in Cosmos or DocumentDB when it was called that, you can only do full document updates, right? Which doesn't work well for mobile scenarios, especially on large documents. Doesn't support other things that we're trying to do in the future. And so we're actually working in combination with them to make sure that's the capability you have available if you just use Cosmos all up and not even in App Center scenarios. From a structural standpoint, we released it with two things. One is the ability to connect or provision Cosmos, and the second is the management of the partitions themselves. And so we include a public and a private partition. Public is basically an area where you can stick configuration, you can stick things universal to the developers or to the end users themselves, and anybody can read them. It doesn't matter what phone you're on or who's talking to it. They are some kind of state or configuration that's just available to everyone that uses your app. From a user partition standpoint, we actually enable you to create documents as the users themselves. Meaning, when you log in with B2C and you want to use data, we actually built a new service that can exchange a B2C token for a Cosmos resource token. And what that means is that you can actually exchange one identity for another and bring that security down to Cosmos, so developers, or end users, I should say, can actually create documents in Cosmos, read them back, and make modifications. And really what that's great for today are things like state, right? You can store the profile, you can store the state, you can store configuration specific to the user. It doesn't really matter as long as it's isolated to the user today. And that's how it exists in preview, but that's not how it's going to exist long term. So on this one, we're kind of like highlight the basic outline of what this looks like. So you have user A, user B, user C. We're just highlighting the fact that all three users are able to read the public partition. All of the private user partitions are very specific to an end user. So like I said, what this does is make it easy for you to take some arbitrary data sensitive to a specific person, shove it in Cosmos, pull it out, and not even know that you're talking to Cosmos per se. One of the things we also included was offline scenarios for writes. We have many plans here, but it was important for us to follow at least a basic store and forward model. What this means is if you want to do an update, we will cache it for an indeterminate amount of time. Right now, it defaults to 1 day. We're actually changing it to be infinite because that was some feedback that we got, that people want infinite by default, and we're all fine with giving them that. The second piece is we're going to be focused on things like conflict resolution. Right? So when you do a write to Cosmos, one of the things you have to deal with is either server-side conflict resolution or client-side conflict resolution. And we're going to be working more on that in the future as well, which is great. From a read standpoint, it's pretty straightforward. Works how you would expect. One is the fact that we will pull documents if you're online. The second being that we will read documents that are cached if you're offline. How long they stay cached is still controlled by you. We do have defaults, which we believe are comfortable. At the end of the day, it's not going to be right for everybody, and so it's going to be very important that you have the ability to control how long and how well caching works, essentially. So what does this look like? First, starts with models. Once you have data models, it makes things relatively easy. You can quickly create objects, give those properties value, and shove it right into Cosmos. You'll notice there's a couple key pieces. One is the first parameter on that method, which is the user ID, which is really just an identifier for that document. The second is the actual model that you want to send to Cosmos. You'll see that we have two, well, only one is shown on this slide. We have the default partitions.user documents. We actually include an enum for our public and our private documents. That's actually a string argument, and so eventually we'll be able to support n number of partitions as well as collections themselves. For doing things like reading, it's as basic as doing a GET request, or you can issue an upsert, or you can get a list of documents. So if I'm a user, I've created multiple documents inside of Cosmos, I can call the list command, it's going to list everything back, it's going to give me a result of all the documents that belong to me. It makes it very easy if you want to store different chunks of data for a specific user. Really, it just gives you some flexibility to manage more than one type of data with the current preview limitations we have in place. Moving on to push, which is actually a service that has existed in App Center for basically about a year and a half, 2 years. It's been in preview that whole time, and mainly that's because we wanted to continue to work on the other services. Again, bandwidth is always the constraint we work with as engineers. And really, push, we put into preview, it's got great use, but it really needs more work, right? And so one of the things that we recently did was we added identity to it. So once we added auth into App Center, we were able to add identity to the push service itself. Again, branching away from being app-focused and more project-focused. When you want to send a notification to somebody, you don't want to have to think about what platform they're currently on, because that constantly will change. I know I've switched phones between iPhone and Android at least 5 times in the last 5 years. And so having just one device in there does me no good. I want to hit me on all devices, basically. So we released 2 months ago. And really, if we had done nothing else, it would be a shame. We've actually done a few things. One is we've been getting user feedback, which is phenomenal. And on the auth service especially, people wanted access to the JSON web token. We didn't previously expose it in the preview release as we then flesh out use cases. But with the ability to grab that JWT, you can actually integrate with app services, you can integrate with APIs. When you call those APIs, you can send the JSON web token, you can validate that on the back end, you can attach data to a specific user. You're now expanding beyond just the mobile space and into the back end portion, right? And so when you sign in, we've now modified it to include properties for the ID token and the access token. This really branches out more into the future of what Azure Mobile Apps is all about. When you think about Zumo, you think about a certain set of Azure resources, which is the wrong answer in our opinion. We want you to choose the backend option that works for you, and so it's very important that we become agnostic of whatever kind of compute resources you want to run your APIs. What this also means is you don't even have to do it in Azure. If you wanted to use a mixed cloud provider offering, which is something that a lot of our customers do, you have the ability to do that, and that's the most beautiful part. The other piece was we actually only supported offline scenarios for individual documents, which is great for a lot of use cases, doesn't meet them all, right? We gave you the ability to list documents. It was important that we actually added offline list support to App Center's data service, and that's something that will be released, I believe, this week, actually, which is great. With those current things that we managed to ship recently, outside of if you've done the setup process around build for these two services and you look at it now, we've done a lot of improvements, which are great. And I highly recommend you check out those setup processes and let us know, because we have done improvements there, but that's not currently what we're doing today. So I think it's, again, important to share with you all really how we're spending our time and what we're all about. One is we're adding support for third-party identity providers. Again, we don't believe you need to use Azure for everything. This is the state that App Center lives in. This is the world we live in. If you want to use Firebase authentication, we want to let you. If you want to use Auth0, we want to let you. Some of these other ones are ones that our customers use, and we will look to eventually support those. But the thing that is actually been working on today is Auth0 and Firebase authentication support. What this means is that you can integrate third parties. You can give us their PEM file. We can validate identities. We actually do not need to manage your identity here at Microsoft. We can integrate with whatever provider you're currently using, which expands the use cases and scope and your ability to actually integrate this within your software. Second piece is we're expanding the UI for the data service so that it actually shares metrics. One of the key things that developers are always looking for when they touch Cosmos is they want to know how many RUs they're currently using. They want to know how much they're spending, basically, because RUs are the currency of Cosmos. Also available, read-write latencies, right? You want to know that as requests are coming in, you're able to meet those requests and you're meeting them fast enough, or at least as fast as you would expect or your users expect. We're also adding a data browser. Cosmos lets you do this inside of the Azure portal. We believe it's important that we improve that experience. If you've ever used the Cosmos Data Explorer inside of Azure, gives you some querying capabilities, some ability to view documents, but it's really not as easy of an experience as it could be, right? And so we believe that we can actually not only deliver a data browsing experience inside of App Center, but we're actually going to improve the one that's in Azure today. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to bring their Data Explorer into App Center, and we're going to work to improve it over the next 6 to 9 months. The next question you're probably asking is why these two? I know if I was looking at the list and it was just the data browser and the actual metric explorer, I'd be like, well, there's other things I'd want to do with data synchronization, for example. And the answer is very simple. Everything we're doing now is we want to give it to you for free. We want to let you deploy Cosmos without an Azure subscription. We want to let you deploy and hook up identity without an Azure subscription. We want to let you come to App Center, deploy these services, and put them to use. And then when you're ready to grow up or upgrade or whatever it might be that you're looking for, whenever you need more power, we're going to give you a button to move that resource into your own subscription. Totally frictionless developer experience. That's what we're going for. So the roadmap. What I was talking about with the free tier is our goals this quarter. If we can get a free tier for you out in the next 2.5, 3 months, we're in business as far as we're concerned. It is our next and highest priority in terms of what we're focused on right now. That does not mean we're not doing other things, because we are always doing a lot of things. Outside of continuing to support and advance the services that we already have in App Center, we're really laying out a roadmap for what the future of not only App Center, but mobile developers looks like at Microsoft. And so some of the things that we're going to be focused on the roadmap, number one is enterprise support. Everybody needs their AAD. We don't want you to have to deploy B2C. We've skipped this one, frankly, because you do have an option today. But the reality is we need to build something better. And so we're going to make first-class AAD supports inside of App Center so you can hook things up, make things easy. We know that that is a very heavy use case, and we know it's a very important one. And so we're committed to following through on that action item. Catch me later. You already have AAD, don't you? You can connect it for free. Yeah, sure. The next piece is view and user profile details. So you have a sense of identity. We have all these services. We're now bringing this in. We're injecting it. You need a place to actually view that information. And so we're going to start building some in-user profile pages inside of App Center that allow you to look at a user's data all in one place. This means crashes. This means analytics. This means the actual data service itself, so on and so forth. Really tying together these elements in one place so that if you have to support a user or you're curious about what a user is doing, you have the ability to check it out and diagnose their issues.
One question on this one.
Uh-huh.
Are you integrating with Microsoft Teams?
No current plans to integrate with Teams, but nothing is outside the realm of possibility. From a push roadmap perspective, one of the things that isn't always very obvious is that we actually own Azure Notification Hubs. We also own App Center Push. These services do not work together, which makes absolutely zero sense to us. And so right now, we've actually been working on a new version of Notification Hubs. We've been working on it for 6 months now. We will be working on it for another 6 months, because the whole intent of the future of Notification Hubs is to, again, follow the same model with auth data, bring it in, give you a free tier, give you a way to upgrade with more power. One of the reasons that we also want to allow you to upgrade and move information into your own subscriptions is your ability to own that data. We actually prefer not to own the data. We would prefer if you deployed it all to your subscription, it was isolated to your environments, and we had no responsibility for it whatsoever. That is where we're headed with Notification Hubs. We want to basically be able to allow you to get up and running with App Center Push, and then have a way out to move your list of device information into your own subscription so you can manage it itself. And we're doing that with Cosmos as well. So not only will you have data in one place, App Center data, you'll have all of your push device lists in the same exact Cosmos instance if you like. That's where we're trying to target. What this means is you can query it as much as you want. It means you can manage it however you want. It also means that you'll get the ability to, again, push a notification to one user, hit all devices, instead of per platform like it is in Notification Hubs today. With the data roadmap, there's a few things. And this is the biggest topic and one of the areas that we're going to have to invest in the most over the next 6 to 9 months. The reason for that is the scenarios aren't very simple. Frankly, there's a lot of them. There are a bunch of key things that everyone is looking for, and we want to make sure to provide that. And so when you look at these list of 4 things, one of them is full offline support. What does that mean? Conflict resolution. What does that mean? Basically managing data in multiple partitions, multiple collections. It comes with a lot of baggage. And so we're just approaching this problem, and we're going to tackle it over the next 6 months. User collaboration. So when you saw the slides previously on how we actually partition data in Cosmos, you'll notice it was all isolated to one person. We don't believe that's necessarily what you want for all use cases. So we're actually going to add in the ability for you to grant access tokens or resource tokens to multiple users and have them work on the same document together. This brings in really interesting scenarios that allow people to collaborate together, and will go above and beyond what data sync from Azure Mobile Apps has today. The last bucket on there, and I already kind of mentioned the partial updates one, is real-time updates and synchronization. This is something that not even Zumo did well. And it's something that we plan to do very well. This is the ability to push updates between devices. It's also the ability to basically do real-time collaboration. So when you have multiple users interacting in the same document space, you have the ability to push real-time updates across multiple devices and multiple users, right? And this can be accomplished with things like SignalR, for example, as well as a push integration. We need both because you need a push integration to get me into the app, and once I'm in the app, we can establish a real-time socket and get that communication up and running. One of the other underrepresented areas when it comes to resolving the developer experience is all the materials and things we need to do as a development team and a cloud service to really make all of this understandable. We have big initiatives kicking off now to overhaul our documentation, overhaul all of our landing pages. We're going to build new case studies so you understand how people are using our services and what's possible. And we're putting together a bunch of videos, level 100, 200, and 300. We're going to go from high level all the way down to very technical. And we're going to give you the information you need to be truly successful with it. And these videos are not only going to talk about App Center. This is about how you become successful with App Center and Azure together. So what does the longer-term future look like? Well, we are going to GA auth in data, hopefully at the end of this year. We are starting planning for new file storage services, which again expand beyond the scope of Xumo and Azure mobile apps. And we are looking into compute. Compute is a loaded box in that, again, there's multiple options, multiple categories. And we will support containers. We will support app services more likely. And we will support functions, mainly because developers want choice and we want to give it to them. What does the future look like even farther? Each one of these boxes and icons actually represents a team within Microsoft. If you can look at this list, we are essentially establishing partnerships with each and every one of these teams. And the reason that we're doing that is because in order to build a mobile app end-to-end, you need all of these elements and more. And so for the next 12 months, our only goal is to identify, what do we want to do exactly with all these different organizations in Microsoft? What are their goals? What are our goals? Make sure we align. It makes us take the longer route, but we believe it's the route that will actually get the best results because it will be the integrated result. And you'll probably have noticed that Azure SQL Server is on there. That is because it's not outside the realm of possibility that we actually do something with SQL. I can tell you right now we're committed to the Cosmos implementation, and we will be committed for the next 6 to 9 months. But we understand the value of SQL Server. I mean, like I said, we don't use a lot of SQL Server, but we do use it. There are use cases that matter. And so it's important to us that we not negate any option, especially the things that you're comfortable and more accustomed to using. The issue that we run into is we want to build the solution you're looking for, and SQL today doesn't accomplish that necessarily. And so we're going to tackle the Cosmos piece, and then we'll look at SQL-specific scenarios that matter, right? Because we actually believe that everything you see on this screen should be used together. I don't actually think that you have to make significant choices here. The real choice that you're making today is when you go into Azure and you look at the 200 services that we have available, which ones are the right ones to use. And that's the wrong approach to us. App Center is a very developer-friendly tool. It's not a systems administrator tool. And what we want to do is package all of these things in a way where you don't make a choice. You basically have a function that you need to perform. You have some value you need to deliver. And we have an answer for you. And that's the key difference between kind of the way Azure is structured today and what we're trying to do on the App Center side. We really want to guide you in the right place. We really want to make sure that as you grow, you can grow, and everything will continue to function totally OK. We want to make sure you're integrating the best of these services and that you're getting the right education. And so by starting at the beginning, by simplifying the overall developer experience, we believe we can deliver on the rest of those promises. So how do you get involved? Basically, go to appcenter.ms and try the services. Even if you hate them, tell us you hate them, as long as you give us a few reasons why. The main reason for that is we're actually very interested in feedback. So much so that we've actually changed the way that we plan on the App Center team. If you go inside the App Center portal, you click on your little avatar, I believe now it's a question mark link, you will see a link to our iteration plans. We basically created a repo on GitHub, and we decided to do public planning. The reason for this is we believe it's important that you understand what we're going to deliver this month. So every month we publish an iteration plan. We believe it's important for you to submit feature requests, bugs, publicly to us. So we let you do that. And we actually track these things on the repo itself. One of the most exciting things about this newer process that we adopted is that it has actually impacted the way we work fairly significantly. One is the fact that this list that you see right here, almost none of the work, a few of those features, were kind of on our radar as we need to do these things now. 3 of those items are now in flight. And mainly it's because developers want them. We actually are working on GitLab support, which as Microsoft is interesting, right? Because we recently acquired GitHub, and GitLab is definitely not GitHub. But users want it. I mean, as you see, it's at the top of the list. So we are and have been taking months of time, because developing new integrations to source code providers isn't always the easiest, to integrate GitLab because users are saying they want it. Same thing with the other items on there. We're actually working on a dark mode for App Center because everybody loves dark mode these days. We are working on the Android app bundle support because people don't want to submit big files with 64-bit and 32-bit APKs inside of them. We are essentially responding to these. And so that's why I urge you to participate. Share feature requests, give reactions to other ones. We care very much so. In fact, one of the other ones that we just did recently was cloning a branch configuration. People had wanted it for a while. We didn't know how much they wanted it. They let us know they really wanted it. And so we carved some time, and we actually committed to adding the ability to clone a branch configuration inside of our build service, for example. All very exciting stuff. And so add that. That's the end of my talk. Any questions? If you don't mind lining up by the mic, it's okay. Yes.